AITA for finally telling my mother-in-law she's not welcome in our home anymore. When I married Daniel, I thought I knew what I was signing up for. I knew he was close to his family, especially his mother. I knew she was strong-willed, outspoken, and a little overprotective. What I didn't know was how much space she would take up in our lives. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, like a shadow hanging over every decision we made. In the beginning, I tried to be understanding. She'd raised Daniel on her own after his dad died when he was a teenager, and she'd built her whole identity around being needed. She called him every day, sometimes twice a day, and I didn't mind at first. I even found it sweet. I'd listen to their calls and think, I hope I'm that close to my son someday. But when we got engaged, something changed. Her tone with me became territorial. At first, it was subtle, a lingering comment here, a sigh there. She'd say things like, "Oh, I used to make Daniel's lunch every morning. He likes his sandwiches with just a touch of mustard," or, "I don't know how you'll ever top the lasagna I used to make." It was constant comparisons, like I was in some silent competition I never agreed to join. I told myself it was harmless. I wanted to start this marriage right, no fights, no resentment. So I bit my tongue and smiled through it, even when she started popping by unannounced. She had a spare key Daniel gave her years ago in case of emergencies, but apparently, a sale at the grocery store counted as one. I'd come home from work to find her in the kitchen, rearranging my pantry. She'd say, "You have so many unhealthy snacks, sweetie." "I'm just helping." I asked Daniel if he could maybe set some boundaries. He brushed it off. "She's just trying to help," he said. "You know how she is." That became his favorite sentence, "You know how she is." Like it was a get-out-of-jail-free card for her behavior. Then came the wedding. Oh, the wedding. Every detail I picked, she questioned. The venue was too small, the dress was too simple, and the cake flavor too plain for Daniel's taste. She even called our florist behind my back to change the flower order because she didn't like the color scheme. When I found out, I cried for hours. Daniel told me I was overreacting, that she just wanted everything to be perfect. But it wasn't perfect, it was exhausting. I'll never forget the night before the wedding. I was sitting in the hotel room, trying to calm my nerves, when she knocked on my door. She sat down next to me, took my hand, and said, "You know, he's always been my world. Please don't take him away from me." I told her I wasn't trying to. She smiled, this soft, almost sad smile, and said, "We'll see." That should have been my first red flag the moment I realized she didn't see me as family. She saw me as a rival. But I kept trying. After the wedding, we bought a small house about 20 minutes from her. I thought that was a good compromise, close enough to visit, far enough for privacy. I was wrong. Within weeks, she started dropping by every few days. At first, she'd bring casseroles or groceries. Then she started cleaning. Not like a nice, helpful mother-in-law kind of cleaning, but an intrusive, passive-aggressive kind. She'd mutter things like, "Oh, you left the laundry in the dryer again?" Or, "I wiped down the counters. They were a bit sticky." One afternoon, I came home early and caught her in our bedroom. She was going through my closet, folding my clothes. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Just trying to help you stay organized." Daniel likes things neat. Something inside me snapped a little that day. I told her firmly that she couldn't just come in whenever she wanted. Her face fell like I'd slapped her. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't realize I wasn't welcome in my own son's home." When Daniel came home, she was crying on the couch, telling him I'd lashed out for no reason. He didn't even ask for my side of the story. He just hugged her and said, "Mom, don't take it personally. She's just stressed." That night, we fought. The first real fight of our marriage. I told him I felt like a guest in my own home. He told me I was too sensitive. He said his mom just cares too much. And I said, no, she wants control. He didn't respond to that. After that, something shifted. Every little thing became an argument. How often we saw her, how long she stayed, what she said about me behind my back. She'd make little comments like, "Daniel, you look thinner, is she feeding you?" Or, "You've been so busy lately, I barely get to see you." And Daniel would just smile and say, "I know, Mom." Then she started calling me directly when she couldn't reach him. Not to talk, but to guilt trip. "He never answers anymore," she'd say. "You're keeping him from me." The thing is, I wasn't. Daniel just stopped picking up her calls because he didn't want to deal with her constant emotional storms. But she blamed me anyway. One day, she showed up while he was at work. She said she needed to clear the air. I should have told her to leave, but I didn't. I made her tea. She looked around the house and said, "You've made it look nice. Different, but nice." Then she added, "I still can't believe Daniel let you paint the living room that color. He's always hated gray." I just stared at her. The conversation spiraled. She accused me of turning Daniel against her, of being cold, of trying to replace her. I told her I wasn't replacing anyone, but that we needed boundaries. She said, "Boundaries are what people build when they stop loving each other." That night, Daniel came home to another crying phone call from her. She told him I'd attacked her. He confronted me, and I told him what actually happened. He said, "You probably just misunderstood her." That phrase, "you probably just misunderstood her," felt like a knife. It was the beginning of the end. After that day, things between Daniel and me changed, not in one big, dramatic explosion, but in small, invisible ways that slowly built up over time. We didn't fight as loudly, but we also didn't laugh as often. The house felt heavier, quieter, like it was holding its breath. I started noticing things, subtle shifts that made me question whether I was losing my mind or if his mother was deliberately trying to drive a wedge between us. For example, I'd make dinner plans with Daniel, and then his mom would suddenly call and say she was making his favorite dish. He'd cancel with me, saying she sounded lonely. Or I'd plan a weekend getaway, and she'd conveniently fall or get sick that same weekend, asking him to come by. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid, but it happened too often to be coincidence. Every time we started to have time together, just the two of us, something would come up involving her. It felt like she was pulling invisible strings, and Daniel didn't even notice. He was dancing to her tune. The worst part was how she'd twist things so effortlessly. She never yelled or cursed or said anything outright cruel. Instead, she'd do it with a sigh, or a look, or a perfectly timed phrase. Once, at dinner, she smiled at me and said, "You know, I can tell Daniel really loves you. He's so patient with your moods." She said it sweetly, like a compliment. Daniel chuckled. I just sat there, my face burning. That's what she was best at, making me look crazy if I reacted. If I got upset, she'd play the victim. If I stayed quiet, she'd play the saint. It was psychological warfare dressed in politeness. I started journaling, writing down every incident so I wouldn't doubt myself later. The little comments, the unexpected visits, the way Daniel always sided with her, just to keep the peace. The journal became my secret proof that I wasn't imagining it, that I wasn't the problem. One Saturday, Daniel told me his mom was coming over to help with the garden. I said no. I told him I wanted one weekend, just one, without her. He said, "She's just trying to spend time with us." I said, "No, she's trying to insert herself into our marriage." He didn't take it well. We argued, loudly this time. He accused me of hating his mother. I told him I didn't hate her, I just couldn't breathe with her constantly around. He left that night and stayed at her house. When he came back the next day, he didn't apologize. Instead, he said, "She's hurt, you know. She feels like you don't want her in our lives." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "She's in our lives every single day," I said. "She's in our house, in our decisions, in our marriage." He looked at me like he didn't understand what I was saying. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't want to. After that, I stopped asking him to choose. Because he already had, he just wouldn't admit it. Months went by like that. I withdrew. I started staying late at work, just to avoid coming home. Sometimes, I'd sit in my car for half an hour before going inside. I'd look at our house, the one I used to love, and feel nothing but dread. Then one afternoon, everything boiled over. I came home early and found Daniel and his mother in the living room. She was folding laundry, and he was sitting there, smiling, like everything was normal. Except, it wasn't our laundry. It was mine. My clothes. She was folding my underwear. I stood there, frozen. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. She looked up, smiling innocently. Oh, sweetheart, you work so hard. I thought I'd help. By going through my personal things? Her smile faded. You really are ungrateful, she said softly. I don't know what I did to make you hate me. Daniel stood up immediately. Mom, it's okay. No, I interrupted. It's not okay. I looked at her. You've crossed every line there is. You come into our home whenever you want, you rearrange everything, you talk down to me in my own house, and now this? Her eyes filled with tears. I was just trying to help, she whispered. Daniel turned to me, angry now. Why do you always have to make her cry? That did it. I felt something inside me break, like a string that had been pulled too tight for too long. I'm not making her cry, I said. She's doing this to herself. You can't see it because you're too busy protecting her instead of your wife. He shook his head. You're being dramatic again. I didn't even respond. I walked upstairs, packed a small bag, and left. I didn't go far, just a friend's place. I told myself I'd only stay the night. But one night turned into 3. Then a week. Daniel called a few times, but mostly to ask when I was coming home. Not once did he say, I'm sorry. Not once did he say, I understand. When I finally agreed to talk, he said, you have to make peace with her. She's not going anywhere. That line haunted me, she's not going anywhere. He meant it literally. Because a week later, she moved in. Apparently, she'd had a fall and couldn't live alone. I don't even know if it was true. But when I came by the house to grab more of my things, her stuff was everywhere. Her framed photos on the shelves, her clothes in the guest room, her perfume lingering in the air. It was like she'd erased me and replaced herself in my life. Daniel said it was temporary. I said, then I'm not coming back until she leaves. He said, you're choosing to abandon your husband because of my mother? I said, no. I'm choosing myself for once. He hung up. That was 3 months ago. Sometimes I still get texts from him. Short ones. I miss you. We can fix this. She's not well. I don't answer most of them. Because every time I start to feel guilty, I remember standing in that living room, watching her fold my underwear like she owned me. I don't know if I'm the asshole. Maybe I am. Maybe I could have tried harder, been more patient, more forgiving. But at some point, love stops being sacrifice and starts being self-destruction. And I was done destroying myself to make room for someone who never saw me as family. When I left, I thought Daniel would fight for me. I really did. I thought maybe finally he'd see what I'd been trying to say for years. That his mother's love wasn't love anymore. That it had turned into possession. But he didn't fight. He let me go quietly, like a man surrendering to gravity. The first few days were surreal. I stayed with my friend, Mia, in her small apartment. She tried to distract me with movies and wine, but every night I'd still end up checking my phone, half expecting an apology that never came. Instead, I got updates, pity texts from mutual friends who'd heard Daniel's mother had fallen and needed care. As if I'd abandoned some poor old woman out of cruelty. They didn't see the manipulation, the way she'd twist everything. They just saw the story she wanted them to see. I didn't correct anyone. I was too tired. Then, about 2 weeks later, Daniel called. His voice was softer than I remembered, hesitant, almost scared. He asked if we could meet, just to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I missed him more than I wanted to admit. We met at a quiet cafe near the lake, one we used to go to when we were first dating. For a moment, it almost felt like old times. But then I saw the exhaustion in his face. The dark circles. The nervous twitch in his hands. He didn't waste time with small talk. Mom's not doing well, he said. The fall was worse than she let on. She's been having dizzy spells. The doctor says she needs supervision. I just looked at him. So, she's still living with you? He nodded. Yeah, for now. Daniel, you know what this means, right? If she stays, nothing will ever change. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I know it's complicated, but she's my mom. I can't just throw her out. I wanted to scream, to shake him, but I didn't. I just asked, quietly, and what about me? He looked down at his coffee. I want you back, he said. I miss you. I miss us. But I can't ask her to leave right now. It's not fair to her. Fair. That word burned. For years, I'd swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, sacrificed my peace, all in the name of fairness. And yet, fairness never seemed to apply to me. Daniel, I said carefully, you keep trying to make everyone happy, but you're just making both of us miserable. He didn't answer. He just sat there, eyes glassy. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I don't know how to fix this. And that was the truth. He didn't. We sat there in silence for a long time. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Just give me time, he said. Please. I wanted to believe him. So I nodded. For the next few weeks, we started talking again. Little by little. Texts, short calls, even dinner once or twice. But every time we spoke, his mother was still the invisible third person in every conversation. I could hear her in the background when he called. Once, she even picked up his phone by accident, and when she realized it was me, she said, "Oh, it's you," before hanging up. Then came the night everything finally snapped. It was a Friday. Daniel invited me over for dinner. He said his mom was going to stay with a friend that evening, that we could have the house to ourselves. I was nervous, but hopeful. When I arrived, the table was set, candles lit, our favorite wine uncorked. It felt like a memory, one last grasp at normalcy. We ate, talked, even laughed a little. For the first time in months, I saw him again, the man I'd fallen in love with. After dinner, we sat on the couch. He took my hand and said, "I want you to come home." My heart jumped. Really? He nodded. "I'll talk to her. We'll figure it out. I can make this work." For a moment, I believed him. I leaned in, hugged him, and that's when I saw movement in the hallway. She was standing there, his mother, watching us. I don't know how long she'd been there, but her face was cold, almost smug. "Well," she said softly, "isn't this cozy?" Daniel jumped up. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I thought you were staying with Carol." She smiled, ignoring him. "I wanted to come home early. I didn't realize I'd be interrupting." Then she looked at me. "You just can't stay away, can you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. This was supposed to be between Daniel and me. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Everything between you and Daniel is between me and Daniel." Daniel tried to intervene. "Mom, stop." She turned to him sharply. "No, you stop. She's turned you against me. Ever since she came into your life, you've been distant, secretive, cold. That's not love, Daniel. That's manipulation." I actually laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think I'm manipulating him?" Her eyes were full of tears now. "I gave up everything for you, Daniel. And she wants to erase me from your life." Daniel's voice cracked. "Mom, please just..." But I couldn't listen anymore. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. Daniel called after me, but I didn't stop. I drove for hours that night, aimlessly, until I finally parked in front of a dark beach and just sat there, crying. That was the night I realized something painful. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about him. He wasn't cruel, or weak, or heartless. He was simply too broken by guilt to ever stand up to her. And I couldn't keep paying the price for his unfinished emotional debt. A few days later, I texted him. "I love you, but I can't live like this anymore. You need to choose peace for yourself, not for her, not for me. For you." He replied with just 2 words, "I understand." That was the last message we exchanged. The weeks after that final text felt strange, like living in a world that kept moving while I was stuck in slow motion. I kept waiting for the ache to fade, for my chest to stop feeling heavy every time I thought about Daniel. But heartbreak doesn't fade cleanly, it lingers, like perfume on a jacket you can't throw away. I started therapy. It was the first time in my adult life that I'd ever sat across from someone who didn't tell me to just be patient or try harder. My therapist, a quiet woman named Elise, listened as I poured everything out, every manipulation, every fight, every moment I swallowed my anger, because it felt safer to keep the peace. When I finished, she said something I'll never forget. "People like your mother-in-law don't just want attention. They want control. And control only works if someone gives it to them." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right for years, Daniel had handed her control over every part of his life, and I'd been standing there, trying to wrestle it back from her. No one can win that fight. I stopped trying to fix things after that. Instead, I focused on building my own routine again, going to work, meeting friends, even painting again, something I hadn't done since before the wedding. But even as I tried to move forward, little reminders of Daniel kept pulling me back. One night, I was scrolling through social media when I saw it, a photo of him and his mother at a family dinner. They were smiling arm in arm, like nothing had happened. She looked radiant, victorious. And in that moment, I realized she'd won. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted, him all to herself again. But the strangest thing? I didn't feel angry. I just felt sad for both of us. For Daniel, trapped in a life where guilt replaced freedom. For myself, forever believing I could love someone enough to fix a family that didn't want to be fixed. A few days later, I got an email from him. It was long, rambling, apologetic. He said he missed me, that things weren't the same without me. But then he wrote, "Mom's been having health issues again. I can't leave her like this." And there it was, the same cycle, the same excuse. The love that always came with a condition. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I decided to visit the house one last time, to collect the last few things I'd left behind. It wasn't about closure, it was about reclaiming something small, something mine. When I pulled into the driveway, his mother's car was gone. I almost turned around, but curiosity, or maybe grief, kept me there. I used my old key, surprised it still worked, and stepped inside. The house looked different. Cleaner, emptier, colder. The furniture was rearranged, the walls repainted. Even the scent was different, lavender instead of the warm vanilla candle I used to light. It didn't feel like home anymore. I went upstairs to pack the last of my things, a few books, some clothes, a box of keepsakes. In the bedroom, I noticed the photo frames on the dresser were different. Where our wedding photo used to be, there was now one of Daniel and his mother. That image, the two of them smiling, standing where I used to stand, broke something inside me that hadn't broken yet. Not out of jealousy, but out of understanding. He hadn't replaced me with another woman. He'd replaced me with his past. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried for a long time. Not the angry kind of crying, but the quiet, exhausted kind, the kind that feels like it's draining your soul. That's when I heard the front door open. I froze. Then I heard his voice. "Hello." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to hide, but another part, the braver, exhausted part, wanted to face this one last time. I stood up and met him in the hallway. He looked shocked to see me. "You're here," he said softly. "I just came to get my things." He nodded, awkwardly. "You should have told me. I would have helped." "I didn't think you'd want me here," I said. He sighed. "It's still your house too." That word, still, sounded wrong now. Like a lie we both wanted to believe. We stood there in silence for a while. Then he said, "Mom's at her friend's. She's doing better." I didn't reply. I didn't care. "I've been thinking a lot," he continued. "About everything. About how I failed you." "Daniel." "No, let me finish," he said. I should have stood up to her. I see that now. But she's my mom. I can't just cut her off. "I never asked you to," I said quietly. "I just asked you to protect what we had." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know. And I didn't. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just avoiding the truth." For the first time, I believed he understood. But understanding and changing aren't the same thing. "Do you still love me?" he asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap between us. But the truth came out instead. "I'll always love who you were. But I don't know who you are anymore." He swallowed hard, looking down. "I don't know either. When I left that day, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew if I did, I might stay. And staying would mean losing myself again." A week later, his mother called me. I don't even know how she got my number. Her voice was soft, fragile, almost pleading. "He's not the same without you," she said. "You broke his heart." For once, I didn't feel guilt. "No," I said. "You broke him long before I came along." I just stopped trying to fix it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You think you understand love. But love is sacrifice." I said, "You're right. And I've sacrificed enough." Then I hung up. It's been almost a year now. Sometimes I wake up still expecting to hear the sound of Daniel's keys in the door, the creak of his footsteps in the hallway. But the apartment I live in now stays silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant city noise outside my window. At first, that silence felt unbearable, like a punishment. Now it feels like breathing. After the call with his mother, I blocked her number. I didn't tell Daniel. There was nothing left to say. For a while he still sent emails, not begging, just small fragments of nostalgia, a photo of our dog, a recipe I once loved, a note that said thinking of you today. Each one chipped at me a little. I never replied, but I couldn't bring myself to delete them either. They sit in a folder I named almosts. Therapy helped more than I expected. Elise made me write letters I would never send, one to Daniel, one to his mother, and one to myself. In the one to Daniel, I wrote about how much I wanted to believe love could fix anything, and how cruel it is to learn that sometimes love is the thing that keeps you stuck. In the one to his mother, I wrote everything I'd never said out loud, the anger, the confusion, the pity. But the hardest was the letter to myself. I kept rewriting the first sentence for days until it finally said what I meant. You are allowed to choose peace over people. Little by little, life began to rebuild itself. I started teaching art classes at a community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I painted again, messy, emotional pieces that looked nothing like my old, careful work. Friends who had tiptoed around me before began to reappear, this time not with pity, but with curiosity. It was like they could see I wasn't trying to be okay anymore. I actually was. But healing isn't linear. There were nights I'd scroll through old photos, wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed. Would things have ever gotten better? Would she have loosened her grip if I'd been more patient, more gentle, less defensive? The mind loves to play those cruel what-if games. Eventually, I learned to answer them with a quiet truth, maybe. But at what cost? About 6 months after I left, I saw Daniel by accident. I was walking through the farmer's market when I heard someone call my name. I turned, and there he was, standing by a stall of sunflowers. For a second, time folded in on itself, the familiar tilt of his head, the way he still kept his sunglasses hooked on his shirt. We stood there awkwardly, surrounded by strangers. He was thinner, tired, older somehow. He smiled, and it almost broke me. "You look good," he said. "So do you," I lied. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. He told me his mother's health had declined again, that she was living with him full-time now. He said he'd thought about calling, but didn't want to make things harder. I told him I appreciated that. Then he said something I didn't expect. "She's been quieter lately. Sometimes she asks about you." I laughed softly. "I'm sure she does." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not in the way you think. I think she regrets some of it." I wanted to believe him, but regret doesn't erase damage. I just nodded. Before we parted, he said, "I never stopped loving you." And I told him the truth. I never stopped either. I just started loving myself more. He smiled sadly, like he understood. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with the smell of sunflowers and the sound of everything unsaid hanging in the air. That night I dreamed of the house, the old living room painted gray, the walls echoing with arguments that never found an end. In the dream, the house was empty. No pictures, no voices. Just light streaming through the windows. When I woke up, for the first time, I didn't cry. I don't think stories like mine have clean endings. People want closure, the big apology, the reconciliation, the lesson tied up neatly with a bow. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes closure is just accepting that you'll never get the apology you deserve, and realizing you're still okay without it. Sometimes I still drive past our old neighborhood. The house looks smaller now. I wonder if Daniel ever thinks about me when he waters the plants, or if his mother still peeks through the curtains expecting me to pull into the driveway. Maybe she still tells herself I gave up. Maybe, in her version of the story, I'm the villain. I've stopped trying to correct that narrative. Everyone needs a version they can live with. Mine is simple. I love someone who couldn't love me freely because he was chained to someone else's expectations. I fought as hard as I could, and when fighting turned into bleeding, I walked away. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally did. There's a quote I keep on my fridge now, scribbled on a sticky note Elise gave me during one of our last sessions. Peace doesn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it just means distance. I read it every morning before I leave for work. It reminds me that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about living fully despite it. Maybe one day I'll fall in love again. Maybe I won't. Either way, the space I've built for myself, quiet, imperfect, mine, is enough. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I can finally hear my own heartbeat.